And we are live. There we go.
Oh, we're
It's
live
been
now.
a little bit slow. Yeah, it's been a little bit slow today, hasn't it? But hopefully we'll have people joining us for this live stream in terms of the roundup of what's been happening in 2025 as we talk about general practice and the impact we've seen on various different things happening over the year. Lots of interesting stuff coming through, and we're just giving people a chance to come in, join us, find out how we're getting cracking on and stuff. But how are you doing there, Andy?
Yeah, pretty good. It's been quite a hectic day, isn't it? I've seen a lot of you this evening. We were in the local federation AGM, and then we were wearing Christmas jumpers. People might see we're wearing these same Christmas jumpers with the Wilmslow Health team on Christmas Day, which will be funny, won't it, if we happen to wear the same clothes when we speak to them live, literally on Christmas Day. So that's what we could have been doing for the last hour. Really excited to be talking about just review what's been happening in the last year. I think it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to get started and see how we get on from there. So let's get cracking, shall we?
Let's go.
2025 has been an interesting year for general practice. And in this episode, myself and Andy are going to recap everything that's happened in the past year to eGPlearning, general practice, and various other things that have been happening as we, as ever, tech enhance your primary care and learning. Hello, eGPlearners. Welcome to this episode. Myself and Andy are looking back in terms of what's been happening in 2025 to general practice and eGPlearning as we recap your year, because bizarrely, December's been a little bit of a slow month when it's come to the updates, hasn't it, Andy?
It has, but it's a good opportunity to take some time, have a look at what's happened over the last year, because it has been a really, really busy year. And, it's useful to recap, take stock, and as we come into the new year, get in a position to think about what we're going to expect in the new year. And I guess in terms of the approach that we're taking, just so people understand what's happening, what we've done is we've taken our show notes from all the sort of joint update episodes that we've done over the last year and created a big master document of all the notes, which actually has run to over 100 pages.
It is massive. It's like an NHS England document.
Yeah, it's almost like the PCN DES or something. We're not going to go through all of it, but we're going to just try and pick out what we thought were highlight stories month by month, and then I guess reflect on what we think are some of the big themes over the course of the year to help us understand what might happen next. So,
all right. So let's dip into our time machine, Andy, and go back to January 2025. What happened to general practice in January 2025?
Well, I'm going to rewind the rewind just a little bit further, because we entered 2025 having had a new government, and when they came into the power, the new government fairly rapidly announced a new settlement for general practice. Because if you remember, we were starting industrial action, collective action towards the end of that Tory government, going into the first few months of the Labour government, and Labour came out and said, we're going to increase the GP global sum by 7.4%, and that sort of I think put an end at that point to the collective action, and we were all hopeful and looking forward to what the new contract might bring in April 2025. So I guess that's where we entered the year. I guess so. Just to set the scene, I think some of the key things that we learned about in January. That's when we first started to hear about the advice and guidance, Les. Those were the first times that we were hearing about that. Talking about fund of 80 million, £20 per advice and guidance. Really, people talk about how that was going to transform outpatient care. So that was really, really interesting. And also, we were covering news stories like the future of primary care networks secure, and we were beginning to hear that the funding for primary care networks was going to extend into the 25-26 year, so the current year that we're in at the moment. And also, Gandhi, a lot of the stories that we have come to follow over the years started in January. We began to cover this story about GPs being out of work in January as well. That actually there'd been a lot of GPs trained over the previous years. The amount of money going into the system to actually pay GPs to sit in practice and do the job hadn't particularly increased. So we were covering GPs who were underemployed or unemployed at that stage. I don't know, do you have any reflections about January, Gandhi? Or
no, that pretty much fitted all the major news stories that we had in that particular month. There was lots to talk about the Rs GP as well. We kept talking about on numerous occasions, and that was being secured at least for another year or so. So I think there were lots of different stories that came through. One of which I believe was the first commentary about using AI in general practice, which ended up becoming a definite theme that ran through 2025, as we talked about as well. But yeah, I guess we need to move on to what happened in February. So what happened in February, Andy?
So I'm just going to start trying to pick a few stories now.
Yeah.
So for me, because I've been working quite close with neighbourhood development in Nottingham, February is when we saw the NHS sort of neighbourhood health guidelines come out.
Yeah.
And we were looking at these as an indication of what the expectations would be around neighbourhoods. I mean, those expectations have shifted and changed over the year, and we're still waiting for definitive guidance at the moment, which we thought would be out by now, but hopefully will land any minute. But we'd got those initial neighbourhood guidelines. So in February, I was digesting those. Anything that jumped out for February for you, Gandhi?
No. So the big news story, like you said, was this concept of the neighbourhood health plan and what that might look like. And initial guidelines, there was lots of talk initially about what this may be and various other things. And we've then come to realise this was going to feed into bigger news stories, bigger plans that came out later in the year. And I guess, we're still, as you said, waiting to hear the clarity of some of these plans in terms of particularly contracting mechanisms. But it was definitely the start of that journey for 2025.
Yeah, and I guess what we were talking about for the start of the year was like the 10-year plan is coming, right? We were constantly talking about when that would land, and part of that big proposals of increase, whether it's a big increase, is debatable, but the increase to the global sum was sort of prefaced around, there'll be a need to reform, there'll be a new 10-year plan, but we don't know quite what's in it. But this is to help manage that. So. Anticipating that 10-year plan going forward.
Yes. But that took us then to March, and then something did drop in March that was a little bit earlier than expected, wasn't it, Andy?
So we had new contract. Dropped in March. So often one of our sort of most watched episodes, I guess, when we have a look at those contracts, try and do it in a timely fashion after they drop. I mean, I don't think we can replay all of the commentary and the what could be said about that contract going forwards. But what were your kind of key things, Gandhi? Or I guess there's a few things that were in that contract that have proved to be significant later on. But what would you draw people's attention to?
Well, the initial news story is about the investment that was put into general practice and that it was a sizable amount. And let's not deny that it was a sizable amount of funding that was put into the GP contract. Does it make up for where we were? No, but it was at least an investment. But as you mentioned, Annie, there were some terms within that were debatable about how clear they were initially and then transferred across. And we're going to cover this as we go through the year. It is definitely a story that evolved and spiraled, and then God knows where we are at this point, to be honest with it. But there were some other changes as well. So massive reconciliations of QOF that came through. There was changes to the advice and guidance that you mentioned in terms of that being a mechanism, which actually one of the recent news stories from today is about the fact that advice and guidance has increased across the country in terms of its use at least. And, and the payment mechanism is probably contributing to some of that in that part. But, there were definitely some significant changes that came out and things. There was another big news story that happened in March that also came out aside from the contract. Do you remember what that was, Andy?
So I think it was the abolition of NHS England.
Yes, definitely.
That came out of left field, which was coming on top of an already announced 50% reduction in ICB jobs as well. Mm-hmm. So people were, including ourselves, I think, we're sort of scratching our heads thinking, where will the functions of NHS England go? Presumably some will go down to ICBs, but they're being thinned out quite significantly already, and some will be absorbed up into the Department of Health. But the whole idea was to cut a lot of money. So a lot of what NHS England does, presumably, will no longer be done anywhere. I guess, or done more efficiently, within the other structures. But that was enormous news. So we had quite a nice episode looking at the history of NHS England. It wasn't quite as old as you might think it is. It was actually founded relatively recently. But yeah, so that was really huge news, and it's not really happened yet either. NHS England is still releasing documents and plans and things like that.
And the aftershock of that is still being felt in terms of the impact that's going to have in terms of, like you say, the redundancy aspects, how people are going to work, the work streams themselves, how they're going to continue. I think there's still no detail on that. And actually, some of the subsequent news stories throughout the year reflect on the fact that maybe it was a very trigger-happy decision made by the government, not realizing the impact and the aspects that it would cause. And we covered that fairly recently in a slightly more negative news story. The fact that government seems to be celebrating the fact they just made loads of people redundant, which is not a great place for government to be honest. No. But hey ho.
Gandhi, do you remember how old NHS England is when it was founded?
I believe it was 2014, I want to say.
Yeah, I think 2012, 2013. So, okay. So very nearly right, but like much newer actually than you'd think. Yeah, so that was obviously a big story, and we're still kind of living with the consequences of that now.
Okay, so I guess that takes on to April. Yeah.
So April. I'm just thinking. So I think in April we began to have these. We had these letters to primary care that have been that had sort of been coming through since Labour took office. But we're having fewer of them now. We have much more letters to Katie now rather than letters to the rest of us. Although we had one to the rest of us recently. So they were talking about changes to the DES contract. We had a letter through just again highlighting the continuation of the the ARS GP scheme. So I think that was something which we learnt about at this stage. I think there'd been it was obviously a temporary measure brought in tail end of 2024, and that was made permanent, I think, in April. So I think I'd say that was one of the significant things that happened. So that's the primary care network funding stream that allows GPs to employ new to practice GPs using R's funding. I think this was when there was some changes to that, and also it stopped being ring fenced as well.
Yeah, definitely. We also saw quite a few changes happen in terms of the contract as well, as they fully materialized, and one of which was around the whole concept of, like we mentioned already, advice and guidance, and Andy mentioned the R's roles. I guess the thing that stood out from April for me, however, was something slightly different, which we haven't actually put in the show notes.
What was it?
Our PCN Plus conference.
Of course, yeah. I think we were promoting it at that time, but
yes. And that's what it was. So it was in April, I believe it was the 21st or 22nd of April. I can't quite remember the exact date.
Something like that. Yeah, that was a fantastic conference. Really enjoyable. Great set of delegates and sponsors and speakers. And it's happening again, isn't it? I guess we should highlight PCN Plus 2026 is happening. It will be in Nottingham, and there'll be information about that on screen and in the show notes.
Definitely. But that, like Andy mentioned, that's a great conference that we had the opportunity to partake in, and definitely looking forward to doing that again in 2026 in terms of various different things. In terms of after that, I think we ended up in May, aren't we, Andy?
May always follows April. So in May, so I remember us doing it quite a good episode themed around AI. So this has been one of the themes coming through the year. AI and particularly ambient voice technology, which I know a lot of colleagues have been having a lot of good experiences with. We've not dipped our toes in that yet at Parkside Medical Practice, so that's probably something for 2026. So that was something that we were talking about, and there was a big kind of push, and it was a big part of the government's messaging around health in throughout the year, really. I guess part of making the improvements happen within budget is improving productivity and applying new technology like AVT. Is a way that can be achieved, and that those plans can be credible. So part of the reason why that's being promoted, but it is great technology.
Definitely. And I guess that was also the month that NHS England released its kind of criteria for use of AI in particular, started to look at ambient voice technologies, as they were calling it, and the data governance around it. And actually, it was almost the month that everything stopped, because they seemed to come down quite firm in terms of how you should be using AI within general practice. And I think that shocked a lot of people in terms of making them think, are we going down the right path? We now know that it was more about trying to look at clinical digital safety. There's been so much more that's happened since then to advocate, but also to pause in some ways. And that's definitely something that we'll be covering in the channel moving forward, but also next week as well. So if you did want to join, we're covering the differences between the different AVT providers, with a special guest appearance from Andy being a Dr. Foster officially during that live stream as well.
Consulting style.
Oh, definitely interesting there. So we move on then, and we go from May to June, I believe. That follows May, doesn't it?
It does. I guess the other thing that happened on the cusp of going May to June was we'd got that big document around the ICB, the new ICB model blueprint that came out as well, which really talked about how ICBs will be changing, and signaled that a lot of the functions that ICBs will be doing will move to other parts of the system. Some moving up to, I nearly said NHS England, but I guess Department of Health, and some remaining and being strengthened within ICBs, and other functions moving to providers. So that was kind of quite a key document, actually, in my mind, at that point in the year. GP's got a 4% uplift. So the dentists and doctors pay review body reports around June each year, and they've advised a 4% uplift, backdated back to April. I think the funding for that did eventually land with practices, and many will have put that into place, but that's always a key point in the calendar that people look out for, the DDRB review. So that's in April.
And it also finished off with the release of the new APR system hitting general practice. So Medicus became available live in the country in terms of being able to be used and things. So that was quite a significant impact and stuff that we saw.
Yeah. How many people how many practices have they got on board, Gandhi? Do you know? Just sort of.
I'm not sure at the moment. No.
Okay.
No.
We've obviously been hearing good things from colleagues who have made the switch, and I guess on Christmas Day we'll be talking to colleagues from Winslow Health who have made the leap to Medicus, and will, I guess, tell us a bit about that, as well as how the rest of their year's been going. So we've been thinking about the 10-year plan for a long time. We were anticipating it last year, been anticipating it up until July this year, and then the 10-year plan hit in July. So that, I guess, was the big event for July. We did another big episode, so dissecting that document. I think it could be summed up as the 3 Darcy shifts: hospital to community, analog to digital, treatment to prevention, and 5 key enabling reforms. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but those reforms were new operating model for the NHS, new transparency of care, workforce transformation, innovation and technology, and a focus on finance and productivity. And we had a good dig into that at the time. What were your kind of reflections on the NHS plan, Gandhi, having waited so long for it?
I think from our perspective, we felt a little, what was the word? Underwhelmed, because it kind of identified a lot of the things that we thought were going to happen. And obviously the government's focus on utilizing those 3 key shifts, but in terms of actual detail as to how it was going to do that, there was none. It was very much a strategy document in terms of what the hopes and anticipations were, but no detail. And as ever, when we're looking at the detail, that's what we would like to see. I think some of the aspects of how they are very ambitious, and the question is whether they will be realised in an environment where there is no resources, no funding support in order to deliver some of that. And it very much focuses on reform. And the question and the challenge with reform is, can reform work at a point where a system is at breaking point? And we're definitely seeing some of the outcomes of that currently with all the other chaos that's going on in hospital worlds right now, but also general practice very much feeling quite fragile and brittle at this point in time.
Yeah, and I'm just noticing that we were also covering at this point the GP employment crisis, as the BMA began to refer to it at this point, with GPs being unemployed or underemployed due to a lack of finance to fund posts for them, despite people still struggling to see GPs when they wanted to or needed to in that, for that matter. So moving through to September, I guess. So I mean, for me, the big thing in September was gosh, this feels like it was a while ago now, but the 43 National Neighbourhood Health Improvement Programme pilot sites were announced. That was quite exciting in Nottingham because the Nottingham Primary Care Networks, Place, and the other health and social care and community voluntary sector partners had put in a joint bid for Nottingham City to be one of these areas, and woohoo, we were successful in that bid. So that kind of really accelerated the development of neighbourhoods in Nottingham. So that was quite a big thing for us, I think, in Nottingham in September.
And case in point, actually, my PCN is one of those networks being part of the Pathfinder work itself. So we'll hopefully see that develop into something as a positive outlook in terms of how things will work locally, but also as a delivery mechanism for the national footprints and stuff in terms of what they may look at and things. So yeah, quite happy about that.
Also, at this sort of point in time, kind of August, September, I think this is when general practice was beginning to talk in a bit more detail about this issue, that within the contract that was agreed by the BMA in April this year, there was a need for online consultation systems to remain open during core hours, to accept queries that needed to be triaged with a human in the loop on the same day, and appropriate action taken, which could be signposting, to other services and so forth, but they needed to be processed on the day. And this became, and still is, quite a hot topic for general practice. So people were beginning to talk about, well, we've got to do this in October. Is it really happening? The BMA said that they would work with the government to make sure the implementation was safe, and work with providers of these clinical record systems to make sure that it was safe. And it wasn't clear whether that work had been completed or properly undertaken. And people say, so is it happening? Are we going to do it?
Definitely. And the first of those was the patient charter, which was you and your practice, which kind of led into that kind of decision and that kind of delivery part of it. So that came out towards the end of August. And then as it kept going on, we kept hearing these stories. And that's when we moved over into September, wasn't it, Andy, in terms of some of the more detailed stuff. And you and I covered it almost on a weekly basis in terms of this kind of ask and what does that mean for practices. And there's definitely some anxiety coming through from general practice in terms of what that might mean.
Yeah, and the BMA was even, threatening reactivating collective action on this issue. But there's been, I guess, over the following months, a number of letters from the BMA to Department of Health and to our health and general practice ministers, and back from those ministers to the BMA about, I guess, who knew what and what was agreed at the time, and whether the BMA agreed to this happening or not. But on the eve of the 1st of October, when this needed to start to happen, the BMA sort of sent a letter to practices, essentially a bit of a climb down, really, saying, actually, you need to do this, or do this, but protest that you don't think it's safe, and write to your ICBs and ask them how they're going to implement this safely. So that was interesting, and quite a stark or sudden change of tone from previous discussions around reactivating collective action, and that's been running ever since that point. In terms of the friction with
it was the start of the Dear letters, wasn't it, that we saw in terms of back and forth between the government, between the GPC, whether it was Dear Wes, Dear Stephen, Dear Katie, etc., and very much that kind of tenseness that we started to see deliver from those particular letters.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, both parties have been accusing each other of being sort of misleading, questioning professional conduct, misrepresenting information, and it's all got quite ugly. And I suppose at point of recording, we're not quite sure where this is all going to end or land, but it's certainly dominating discussion around the relation. It seems to be dominating discussion around the contract. And in fact, I guess more recently, was it let's say it was in November, it was announced that the government will be not
Jumping
just
ahead. Jumping ahead.
but thematically relevant, Gandhi.
Yeah,
Okay,
go for it. No, go for it. No.
So the government will no longer just be talking to the BMA about the contract of the contract, but will be talking to actually 4 bodies, including the Doctors Association UK, I think Health Watch, RCGP, and I've forgotten who the other one is, or maybe the other one is the BMA. Is there another organisation?
BMA, RCGP, Health Watch, Patient Safety Organisation, NAPSI or whatever it was. And
Doctors Association UK, was it?
no, so I don't believe that. I don't believe they're part of
okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Not officially. So yeah. But before we get to that, I guess still in September, one of the other things that happened also was the Digital Transformation Summit that I was part of. Amazing event in collaboration with the Modality Partnership. It was a great tech event, massive as well. We had a couple of hundred people in person. We had about 800, 900 people online joining us to watch as well, which was absolutely stonking amazing. And, you know, really showcasing some of the power of tech and how it can help in primary care and things. And definitely looking forward to doing version 2 next year. And it kicked off for me, absolutely conference season, which was definitely then what happened in October in terms of some of the aspects. So many people in general practice will probably realize that October is very much conference season, whether that's political conferences or general practice. That includes things like the RCGP conference, which had its milestone first conference in Wales, as well as best practice, where I had an absolutely stonkingly good time.
I couldn't make it this year. I was
gutted when Andy was like, Gandhi, I'm not going to make it. I was
I'm moving house.
So. Damn you! How could you?
Yeah. Next year.
No worries, eGPlearners. I've already told Andy that he must attend next year.
No moving house.
Yeah, no moving house in that particular week and stuff. But you know, best practice is always a great conference for me. Always enjoyed going there, and a great opportunity for me to catch up with loads of people. Had the opportunity to speak, which was awesome. But more importantly, got to meet some awesome people in it, and did some really cool, from my perspective, content as well. I really enjoyed making the content. It kind of weirdly brought back my love of doing some of the content as well.
Yeah, your show reel was great. You know, conference reel of all the conversations that you had was absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed watching that. Great. So I guess we're nearly through the year, right? So
well, not forgetting that October was also the month that we pretty much consistently covered stuff around the contract changes, because that's when it came to full effect and people were trying to figure out what does that mean, how does that impact stuff. And then moving on towards, I believe it was November, where we then start to see more changes come through, including one of the most interesting. So it's a bit of a weird one, but unless you're in general practice, you don't quite understand the impact of this. A commitment from the government to review the payment mechanism and look finally at the Cahill formula, which you and I have been talking about for years.
Oh, yeah.
For years that this needed looking at.
It sounds it sounds esoteric, I guess, if you're not familiar with it, but it's the formula by which the amount general practices get paid as part of their contract per head of population is calculated. So there's a kind of a standard amount, and then there's a weighting which is based on certain certain aspects of your population. However, a criticism of Cahill for years and years is that it doesn't properly account for deprivation and health inequality, and actually underfunds practices and patients who kind of live and get treated in areas of sort of higher social and economic need. So so many people have said that this needs reviewing, and they have done so for many years, and it's going to happen. So that's good. Obviously, we need to see what's going to replace it. And, you know, so I guess we'll reserve judgment until we know. But it's good that it's being looked at.
Yeah. And as Andy mentioned, November was also the month that for the first time ever, the BMA lost its exclusive rights to negotiate the GP contract with some of that. And I've got the document here, moving towards the RCGP, the National Association for Primary Care, Health Watch, and NHS Confederation being the 4 other voices that the government would start to look at in terms of understanding GP contract, which still makes me feel very anxious, to be honest. Now, it's not to say those organisations do not have merit and have value. They absolutely do. However, should they be involved in negotiation of the GP contract, I think many GP partners out there would say, definitely not, because how can they understand the impact of the workloads that they are then committing practices to? And I can't find any other system whereby anything like this is allowed to happen. The negotiation is always with the organization that delivers the output, not other voices itself. So it's going to be a really interesting time to see what that happens in terms of how that transpires into the impact for the negotiation of the GP contracts moving forward.
I think government positioning for optionality on ignoring the BMA if they continue to not be happy with the relationship with the BMA, and position themselves so they can say that they've spoken to other people as they impose a contract on general practice. Positioning for it strengthens their hand with the BMA. This is my feeling. But let's see.
That moves on to December, which bizarrely has been a relatively calm month for significant stories. That's not to say there have not been stories. They absolutely have. We're about to possibly move into another junior doctor strike, although potentially that's being averted depending on whether or not they accept the offer now being put to them before Wednesday, I believe it is, in terms of when they are meant to go on strike. And we maybe have a new super flu going around that's causing chaos and challenge and stuff going on in general practice, and whether we see the return back to, segregation, masks and all that kind of stuff. Although Keir Starmer's categorically said that won't happen today. Not always the best thing to say. It's never going to happen in my experience in general practice, because me and Andy know sometimes things that the people say won't happen do definitely and will happen, and things from there.
I guess I was going to say one more thing to just think about was obviously in November we had the budget. I guess the reason we didn't really talk about it in November was because there wasn't really that much of an impact as far as we could tell, and in terms of the post-mortem and dissection afterwards on general practice. Actually having been hammered with employers' national insurance the year before, really increasing costs for practices, this year seemed relatively calm in terms of specific measures affecting general practice, but it happened. So
yes, and then finishing off December, we are going to have what probably could be one of the most interesting live streams we've done for a while, or I've done for a while, as I compare the 4 different ABT providers next week, in fact. So if you're watching this live on the 17th of December, I'm going to compare 4 different providers. As I said, Andy's going to guest star in part of that to help me out with it. But it's going to be a really interesting episode as we compare various different aspects, and very much the flavour for 2026 from eGPlearning is going to be as what we've always done, to try and help inform eGP learners out there of all the stuff going on in general practice, whether that's contractual, technological, and sometimes some of the fun stuff in there. We did forget to mention we started our own game of on our wavelength, which we haven't.
On our wavelength.
Yeah,
we need to keep going with that as well. I need a prop my end so that I can we can reverse roles and I can transmit my wavelength to you.
Definitely.
So good.
And hopefully we will have more content that focuses around conferences, various other aspects to help you understand and navigate this crazy world of general practice, as I suspect 2026 is going to be the year we see real transformation in general practice happen. Good, bad, I don't know. We will see. Andy, what are your thoughts of 26?
Yeah, keep an eye on the contracts. It's not just a new GP contract. There are small neighborhood provider contracts, multi-neighborhood provider contracts, all sorts, could happen. What's going to happen with the primary care network contract? It's going to be really, really exciting when we find out what's happening with those contracts come April. So that's what I've got my eye on. Again, I guess looking back, what's your kind of theme of the year, or big story of the year now we've had that recap?
I think for me, the 2 things that stick out is very much contentious discussions between organisations in terms of the Dear Katie, Dear Wes letters and the BMA/government interactions, which started off in a really positive way from some perspectives, and there's definitely spiraled from there. And then the other one has been absolutely advent of the year that AI started to hit general practice, and I think we're going to see that deepen throughout the next year as well. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year moving forward. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think I'd just kind of highlight, I think neighborhoods have been a big part of my year last year, or thinking and talking a lot about neighborhoods. And as part of that, I think the new contract structures say I guess I'm picking the same thing, but yeah, theme of last year, and I think it's going to be a big theme of next year as well.
Absolutely. So if you want to find out how those themes affect general practice, make sure you subscribed. Absolutely join us as we carry on in 2026. Join us on Christmas Day for our extra special episode with some special guests as well. Lots of specialness going on, and hopefully no turkeys being burnt and stuff. And as ever, we'll be here to tech enhance your primary care and learning. We'll catch you in the next episode, and maybe next year. See you later.